Hey everyone, and welcome to our Q&A presented by Just Love. My name is Paula Jane and I'm talking to Judy Carroll. Judy is an internationally known author. Her books include The Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, and her two most recent books, both Kindle editions, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET, and Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness from an Off-Planet Perspective. Hi Judy.
Hi Paula, hi everyone.
Today we're going to talk about Judy's book, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET. Judy released this book last year and it is available as an ebook through Amazon or Kindle. This book is a commentary to Alien Interview presented by editor-author Lawrence Spencer. The story was supposedly produced from documents that were sent to Spencer in 2007 by a Mrs. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, formerly of the Women's Army Air Force Medical Corps. Although this book has a very strong following worldwide, having been translated into a number of languages, much doubt has been cast upon its authenticity.
Yes, Paula, when I first read the original Alien Interview book by Lawrence Spencer quite some years ago, it affected me deeply, but in a mixed way. Parts of it were accurate, right down to a description of the artificial or semi-artificial forms used by the Greys, and also the fact that they're insectoid as opposed to mammalian-type humans. These were things that I knew about from working as a Grey myself, but as far as I was aware, nobody else down here had ever spoken or written about these things back then. The original book was published in or around 2007. At the same time, there was so much in it that was not correct, such as all the intergalactic battles and Star Wars-type portrayal of the universe, some glaring contradictions, and the militaristic hierarchy in the universe that the ET character Carroll describes. Also, some of the terms she used, for example, doll bodies for the Greys' artificial forms. The Greys and other ETs refer to these as containers, as in containers for the soul. I've never heard the term doll bodies used by anyone up there. However, I have since heard it used by somebody down here who I believe is a military disinformation agent. So this backs my suspicion that there's a lot of this disinformation in the original book. I've also read that Lawrence Spencer is a Scientologist and that the Alien Interview book is written along those lines, but I have no idea if this is correct or not, as I know nothing about Scientology. There is a reference towards the end of the book where some sort of technology is described that sounds rather like the thing used by the Scientologists that they claim assists us to free ourselves from certain programs that have been used on humans of Earth. The ET character also talks a lot about how Earth is a prison planet with amnesia nets that need to be found and deactivated. This is a very shallow misunderstanding of the real situation down here.
So Judy, you say in the introduction that aside from the possibility that these crafts were not of this world, the occupants of the ships have created even more of the same responses. You go on to say that there were quite a number of witnesses at the military bases to which the bodies were taken, and the problem here is that the descriptions of the occupants retrieved from the ship vary from witness to witness, which has provided fertile ground for the skeptics to denounce the whole episode. You raised the possibility that the occupants weren't necessarily all alike. Some did have 6 fingers on each hand and others had 4, or 3. Some did look more insectoid and others more human or reptoid or robotic. So what I wanted to ask you here is, do you know who was on board and where they were from?
Yes, in the original book, the ET character is claimed to be a survivor of the Roswell crash. The crew of the main ship involved were what researchers down here call Zetas, from the Zeta Reticuli star system. There were a number of different cultures living in that system, including some Zeta Earth-human hybrids. So yes, the crew could have been made up of several slightly different-looking ones.
You say the main ship. Were there others involved?
Yes, when the first ship crashed, another crew came to their rescue, but also crashed. Some on that ship were blue-grey Arcturians, which are Zeta Arcturian hybrids. They can have either 3 or 4 fingers on each hand because they have a retractable thumb plus 3 fingers. There's a huge amount of confusion from researchers because I think there were also different timelines involved. The rescue ship tried to go back in time to intervene.
What do you mean there were different timelines involved?
The pilot of the second ship was a sibling of the co-pilot of the first ship that crashed. He witnessed the crash and attempted to go back in time, which the Greys can do, to intervene. The thing was, on a higher soul level, the crash was meant to happen, so he was blocked from intervening and in fact got caught in the same interference that caused the crash of the first ship. This interference came from down here.
So how do you know this?
Okay, from the Zeta perspective of my blended soul consciousness, I have quite a strong connection with the ones who were involved. The Zetas operate from a much more unified perspective than Earth humans. Their collective consciousness is much more amalgamated, so tapping into the group consciousness is easier.
So both of the ships crashed, and from a higher soul level, the crash was meant to happen. From our limited 3D perspective, that sounds a little traumatic. Can you tell us why it was meant to occur?
Yes, there were several reasons for the crash. What people don't generally know is the threat of Nazism didn't end with World War II. The Nazis were not defeated, they simply went underground. The other thing is they'd been assisted by an inner-Earth group of planetary controllers whose agenda was an aggressive takeover of the planet. These ones look upon themselves as a master race who were genetically superior to the rest of humanity. This is what the Aryan ideal concept of Nazism was and still is all about. This group also provided the Nazis with anti-gravity technology which enabled them to build disc-type ships which resemble the classic UFOs. The story behind this is told in Len Kasten's book, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. Despite some disinformation in it, this is quite a good book. Their plan was a complete and overt planetary takeover using these superior ships as weapons. The timing was perfect, with America, England and their allies exhausted by the years of war and certain that Nazism had been defeated, so their guard was down somewhat. The weaponry they had could not match what the Nazis had at their disposal. The Zeta group involved in the Roswell crash were originally Earth humans from an earlier version of Earth who'd been driven off-planet by this same inner Earth group eons ago. This is why they were given permission by the universal governing body to intervene, to at least even out the playing field somewhat down here, by providing the Allied forces with this higher technology. It was basically a donation of technology. The way they decided to do this was by allowing a ship to crash down here. This would be helpful in 3 ways. Firstly, it would provide off-planet advanced technology for scientists in America to back engineer. Secondly, it would provide proof that there really are greater forces out there in the universe in the form of sentient beings with this advanced technology. And thirdly, a crash would enable a non-threatening way for all of this to be achieved. Humans have been so brainwashed over millennia to believe that they're the ultimate life form in the cosmos, alone created in the image of God. And this image is the Nazi Aryan ideal, which has been pushed through religion and its depiction of angels as blonde, blue-eyed, human-like beings. If the Zetas had tried to approach in any other way, they'd have been taken to be demons, or at least monsters of some sort. This Aryan ideal concept still drives a form of cosmic racism and dominates the field of ufology very strongly.
So much information in there, Judy. So a quick recap. Several reasons for the crash. The first one being the threat of Nazism didn't end with World War II. The Nazis were not defeated. They simply went underground. The Nazis had been assisted by an inner Earth group of planetary controllers whose agenda was an aggressive takeover of the planet. This group also provided the Nazis with anti-gravity technology, which enabled them to build disc-like ships, which resembled the classic UFOs. The Nazis had this weapon at their disposal, and so the Zeta group involved in the crash at Roswell were given permission by the universal governing body to intervene, to at least even out the playing field somewhat down here by providing the Allied forces with this higher technology. All of this was helpful in three ways. The first way being it would provide off-planet advanced technology for scientists in America to back engineer. Secondly, it would provide proof that there really are greater forces out there in the universe in the form of sentient beings with this advanced technology. And thirdly, a crash would enable a non-threatening way for all of this to be achieved. Wow.
Yes, the Greys always have three reasons for everything they do, which brings balance into the picture.
Yes.
Everything is far deeper than what it appears to be on the surface. That was something that our teacher Auris told us many years ago. Always look for three reasons behind everything that happens. Don't just take things at surface value.
Three reasons. So now, 77 years on from the so-called end of World War II, do you see the same kind of a parallel with the Nazis and the war between Russia and the Ukraine?
Yes, for sure. Both the far-right Nazis, or fascists as they're also known, are fighting it out with the far-left communist regime for total control of Earth-plane humanity.
So this inner Earth group of planetary controllers whose agenda was an aggressive takeover of the planet, is this the same agenda that has been at play since the beginning of time, controlling the people on planet Earth for their own objective?
Yes, they still consider themselves to be the entitled owners of the planet, with humanity here only to serve as their slaves. It's a real power and control thing.
So the universal governing body allowed a somewhat evened playing field. So now this higher technology is accessible to both sides. Did the universal governing body believe that this would prevent the takeover altogether, or did they just buy some time?
It was more a matter of buying time. Now is the time for the planetary shift, which is what's driving matters much more now than back then, just after the war. Both controller groups needed to be brought out in the open more, so that humanity could see more clearly just what was and has been going on for millennia. People are way more awake now than back then. One controller group had shown their true colours through Nazism, but the other group still needed to be provided with a cosmic test to see if they'd learnt their lesson from the earlier time known as Atlantis. We ultimately create our own reality through the way we think and focus our thoughts, so Earth-plane humanity needed to be woken up to what's really going on down here to enable free will choices to be made. In this way, the more positive and empowering choice of love over fear will change things for the better. The controllers have brainwashed humanity for millennia through religion, politics and warmongering. Their agenda needs to be brought out into the open.
You often speak about how there are two controller groups down here playing out. Are these two groups as a result of the intervention?
No, they've always been here, but since the intervention they've become more obvious. As I said, people are now more awakened, and a lot of this awakening has been the result of people seeing more clearly what both sides do with advanced technology and how spiritually immature they both are.
So with this higher technology being available to both sides now, are both sides using it to control the planet?
Yes, for sure. Or at least they're trying to. It's their way of spreading fear, which is the key to controlling and disempowering people.
So now, taking into consideration everything that is playing out on the planet right now, are there any other comments that you'd like to make before we close for today?
Yes, there's a very important point for people to know. There are clear laws and protocols in place on the universal level, and the controllers of this planet are treading on thin ice. While their war games remain confined to Earth, the off-planet people cannot interfere or take sides. But in the case of nuclear missiles that impact off-planet, or the placement of weapons in space, then steps will be taken that have already been demonstrated clearly, but of course hushed up by the authorities down here. On the 24th of March in 1967, a giant UFO appeared in the skies above the Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, in the United States of America. It was seen by all the guards on duty, and it disabled 10 nuclear weapons. According to the on-duty commander of the base, Captain Robert Salas, this action was supposedly impossible. Each of the 10 Minuteman missiles were running on different systems, but they were all simultaneously put into no-go condition, which means that they could not be launched. This incident occurred at the height of the Cold War, when the United States and Russia were teetering on the brink of a major nuclear attack that would have been catastrophic for humanity. This incident was reported, but of course it was hushed up very effectively by the military, but it did happen.
Wow. And this is something that people really do need to know about. But getting back to the Roswell incident, wasn't that going against universal protocols by taking sides by supplying technology to the Allied forces?
Yes, in a way the Zetas did break protocol by doing this, but again, 3 good reasons were involved. Firstly, if they hadn't done this, the Nazis would have triumphed, with cataclysmic results for humanity. They had to be blocked somehow, but the time wasn't right for full-on disclosure back then. The second reason was that America was to be the focus of the predicted rise of Atlantis, which had caused an earlier cataclysm on Earth. The spirit of Atlantis was to be reborn there in America to face the same test which they'd failed in an earlier version of events. Providing them with advanced technology was how this test could be carried out to see how they'd handle it. The third reason was a bit more personal to the Zetas, going back to an even earlier version of Earth where they'd had incarnations as the Ant People. At that time, eons ago, their culture was almost decimated by the Reptarians, along with another hybrid culture known as the Anunnaki, which the Zetas refer to as the Blondes. These are the same ones still here in the inner Earth who inspired Hitler's Aryan ideal, along with the selective breeding program and the ethnic cleansing that was part and parcel of the whole Nazi master race plan. The Zetas could not stand back and see a repeat of all this crazy xenophobia that these ones had carried out on them and from which they're still recovering today. This is the reason why those of us who are operating through a dual Zeta-Grey Earth-human consciousness have trouble with so much of the UFO so-called research that goes on now, with its high level of cosmic racism. I'll talk more about this in our next episode.
Okay, Judy, that will be very interesting and thought-provoking, I'm sure. So on that note, we will close today's comments by an undercover ET. However, we will continue this dialogue next time, where Judy will comment more on the Zeta group and how they were originally Earth humans from an earlier version of Earth. This was a very long time ago when they too were attacked and driven off-planet by the same inner Earth group.
Yes, there's quite a story involved in that.
Yeah. I believe their history is quite complex, so looking forward to hearing it. So if you'd like to read more about all of this, I'd just like to remind everybody that Judy's books are available from Amazon, or you can go directly through Judy's website, which is included in the link below. And if you'd like this video, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, sending you all much love and thank you all so much for listening. Bye for now.